Okay, so this should be the last podcast in this section on solar system, energy balance, weather and climate. Of course, we haven't said much in terms of the details of the weather and climate. We will do that as we go along. So let's conclude here with Earth. Now, we already said a lot about Earth, but let's read it again from the magic school bus explanation of the solar system. Here are the northern lights or the southern lights again. Okay, solar wind, maybe, I don't know, you can start anywhere. Here, landmass. Dry land occurs wherever the planet's rocky outer crust is thick enough to poke out of the oceans. So you can think of Earth as a water planet with land coming up in a few places. 70% of the surface area is covered by the ocean, of course, and over time the land has moved around. So maybe at a later stage I will add the continental movements. There are some very nice videos showing the reconstructions. What does it mean? We don't know how continents actually moved in the past other than from indirect evidences. We know that India was way in the south in the southern hemisphere. It moved across the equator to the north and crashed into the Asian land plate starting around maybe 30 million years ago, and it still continues to move north and push under the plate, which created the Himalayan mountains, which obviously affects climate and created the monsoons and so on. Okay, so remember that the dry land occurs now wherever the planet's rocky outer crust is thick enough to poke out of the oceans. I have podcasts on the structure of the Earth if you want to follow up, but here let's just stick to the weather and climate. Earth looks pale blue when viewed from space because remember the Earth's energy coming in as visible has all these VIBGYOR, violet, indigo, orange, blue, yellow, red, etc. They are scattered or absorbed and reflected by various molecules in the water, in the ocean, on land, in the atmosphere. Blue wavelength is scattered the most in every direction, so it tends to come at you most preferably when you look at the ocean or when you look at the sky. Okay, so Earth looks pale blue and viewed from space. It was called the blue marble when the first photo of the Earth was shot from space. Water planet, the ocean covers more than 2/3 of Earth's surface. Scientists think the water arrived billions of years ago and that it came out of the ground as a stream. It then formed the oceans. This question still continues to be debated and there is still a lot of water apparently in the crust, massive oceans of water and so on. But solar wind here is captured near the north and south poles. The high-speed blast hitting the air creates an amazing light that is called an aurora, or in the northern hemisphere the northern lights. Okay, you get stormy weather, which we'll talk more about later. Well, Earth's atmosphere is made up of areas of hot and cold air. We talked about low latitudes being warmer than high latitudes, right? So cold air is heavier, it wants to move and push up the warm air, so you can imagine all kinds of movements. When they meet each other, rain clouds and storms form. We'll see a little bit more later. Basically, if warm air and cold air meet, then cold air, which is heavier, tries to stay near the surface and pushes up the warm air. And we'll see later that the pressure decreases from the surface into the upper atmosphere as you go towards the sky. If the pressure decreases, then the air parcel that is rising begins to expand. From your basic chemistry you know that, and when it expands it cools, and when it cools the water that's in the air parcel begins to condense, which can form clouds, and then release that condensation energy, and storms can form. So I've jumped ahead a little bit in terms of energy, but nonetheless, Earth is special. It is the only place in the universe known to have liquid water on its surface for now. Earth is also the only place with signs of life. The planet's position in the solar system is sometimes called the Goldilocks orbit. It has seasons that are neither too hot nor too cold, but just right for life to survive. So Goldilocks syndrome is a story that comes from the West. Basically, this little girl who was looking for a blanket that was not too warm and not too cold and just perfect. So let's say for now we don't know whether life exists elsewhere, water exists elsewhere. We know that frozen water exists on many moons of the planets, maybe on the other side of the our own moon as well, and so on. So we are for now in the perfect temperature which supports life, at least to the extent that we have evolved, and I am using computers to create podcasts, and you will probably listen to it and learn from me and so on and so forth. So I love summer, the seasons. Dorothy Ann writes, most places on Earth experience 4 seasons: winter, spring, summer and fall. The seasons occur because Earth is not upright but is tipped over compared to its path around the sun, the orbital plane we called it. For 6 months of the year, the northern half of the Earth is tipped towards the sun, as we saw before, making it warm. For the rest of the year, the southern hemisphere is pointing to the sun and making it warmer there. So you have summer season and winter season, but of course it's not all summer. You get spring and fall as well, as the sun is coming up and then going back in both hemispheres. So we saw this before. So here's the sun. We have winter and summer, autumn and spring, summer and winter, and autumn and spring, based on which hemisphere you are in. Okay, so much of Earth's surface is being worn away by water running over it. The water slowly breaks up the solid rocks. Relentless flow of water chews into the rocks over time, because there is infinite time for it to keep flowing, right? That's what we call the hydrologic cycle, which we will look at later. Earth's solid outer surface floats on a layer of magma, hot molten material or hot melted rock. A volcano forms where the magma breaks through the crust and explodes. Right now there are volcanoes going off in several places. Miss Fizzle says Earth is like a giant magnet. There is liquid iron in its core, which moves in a spinning motion. Scientists believe this motion creates Earth's magnetism. We have northern pole and southern pole of the magnet. Quickly, the moon. Earth has a companion. The moon is our planet's own natural satellite. That's an object that travels around it. It may have formed when a small planet smashed into the Earth 4 billion years ago. That's a long time ago. You can see the moon day or night, but it shows up best after sunset. It's always visible somewhere. Footprints stay put on the moon. There is no atmosphere, so there is no wind or rain to wipe them away. Let's moonwalk here. Mountain view. The moon's mountains can be seen from Earth. If you have a good binoculars, you can definitely see them, or the rabbit shape we see as dark shades. They appear paler than the dark seas that cover the low-lying areas. Okay, so you have all these things. Seas doesn't mean water. Okay, so only 12 people have ever walked on the moon. The astronaut is Charles M. Duke Jr. here, lunar module pilot of the Apollo 16 mission, which landed on the moon in April 1972. You remember Neil Armstrong, of course. Okay, so let's read a little bit more and then we'll come back. You can't get seasick on the moon because it doesn't have the seas, the moon rotates at the same speed that it takes to orbit the sun, so the same side is always facing the earth and we never see the back side, so it's called the dark side of the moon, the famous song, if you know what I'm saying. Lunar module. This Apollo lunar module has room for 2 people. At liftoff, only the cabin section flies back into space. The legs stay on the moon, so it detaches and takes off. The last lunar mission was made in 1972, but now many countries, including China and India, are making plans to go back to the moon, send people to the moon. Moon's surface is covered in a deep layer of dust. It was made when space rocks smashed into the surface and broke up into tiny pieces, and it's silent on the moon because there is no air to carry sound. When we say no atmosphere, it's very, very, very weak, okay, compared to Earth. Now the old joke, why is there no restaurant on the moon? Because there is no atmosphere. Atmosphere in the sense ambience, right? If you don't understand, don't worry about it. It's a very poor joke. Okay, why can't you get seasick on the moon? Tim says, looking up at the moon, we can see several dark patches on its surface since ancient times. Astronomers have called these lunar seas. They have names like the Sea of Tranquility and Ocean of Storms, but the moon has no water. These seas are actually vast areas of dark rock that erupted from volcanoes when moon was much younger and hotter. There are no volcanoes on the moon now, but it does have moonquakes from time to time, like the earthquakes. So I'll stop here, and I have a bit more of a business actually. I have to go through some terminologies, and I also have to mention moon's role on Earth's climate, which we will do in the last podcast. I promised this would be the last podcast, but I miscalculated. Sorry, we'll have one more explaining a few things of our solar system, our energy balance, our weather and climate. Okay, come back and see you in the next podcast. Kids, keep asking questions, please.